the last great Sultan, Abdul Hamid II. Before we get into the video, don't forget to check out my private community over at Patreon. There we'll be doing exclusive articles, videos, and many more. Link in the description below. Abdul Hamid bin Abdul Majid was born on the 21st of September 1842. He was of mixed Turkish and Circassian origin. His father was Abdul Majid I, the Ottoman Sultan that ruled from 1839 to 1861. Meanwhile, his mother was Tirmujen Khadin, a Circassian consort of the Sultan. During his youth, he studied literature and poetry. Furthermore, he was able to speak many languages, including Ottoman Turkish, Persian, and Arabic. Since the 18th century, the Ottoman Empire was in a state of perpetual decline. This was exacerbated due to the rise of nationalism, particularly in the Balkans. This led to several revolutions, which resulted in independence for countries such as Greece and Serbia in the early to mid 1800s, which was further intensified in 1875 when several uprisings occurred across the Ottoman territories within the Balkans. As a result, there were many people within the Ottoman Empire that called for reform in order to slow down the process of decline, leading to the Sultan at the time, Abdul Aziz, to be overthrown on the 30th of May 1876 in favor for Murad V, Abdul Hamid's brother. Though his reign was short-lived, as only 3 months later, on the 31st of August 1876, Murad V was also deposed on the grounds of mental illness, subsequently causing Abdul Hamid II to become the new Sultan of the empire, as he was seen as the most suitable candidate. The perpetual state of decline that the Ottoman Empire faced in the 18th and 19th century led to the Tanzimat era. This was a period during Ottoman history in which the purpose was modernization of the empire through Western ideas. The main objective was to enact a fundamental change that would transition it from an empire based on theocratic principles to a modern state. There were many reforms introduced, such as the establishment of new institutions that would guarantee security of life, property, and honor to all subjects of the empire, regardless of their religion or race. Furthermore, it authorized the development of a standardized system of taxation in order to eliminate abuses and establish fairer methods of military conscription and training. Most notably, there was promises for equality for the non-Muslims within the empire, particularly the Jewish and Christian populations. However, this came to an end following Abdul Hamid's assumption to power, as he implemented the first Ottoman constitution in December 1876, which established the fundamental principles of the empire. Furthermore, the Ottoman parliament, known as the Mesli-i Umumi, was seen as the voice for the people. It was composed of 2 stages, the Chamber of Deputies and the Senate. The chamber would have 150 members, in which 69 were Muslim and the rest were non-Muslim. However, at the same time, the Ottomans were experiencing the infamous Eastern Crisis, where several uprisings had happened across the Balkans, as people in Albania, Bosnia, and Bulgaria all revolted against the Ottoman Empire. This was for an array of reasons, such as in Albania, where the Highlanders resented the new taxes and conscription laws. Meanwhile, in Ottoman Bosnia, the population were treated harshly by the Beys and Aghas. The lack of implementation of the new reforms by the lords that Abdul Majid I had announced, which included new rights for Christian subjects, a new basis for the army, conscription, and an end to the much-hated system of tax farming. They frequently resorted to more repressive measures against their Christian subjects. The tax burden on Christian peasants constantly increased. This inspired Bucharest-based Bulgarian revolutionaries to enact their own nationalist uprising. Taking advantage of the opportunity, Montenegro declared war on the Ottomans in June 1876, when Constantinople rejected the proposal of handing parts of Herzegovina to them. Meanwhile, the semi-independent Principality of Serbia opted for independence and declared war on the Ottoman Empire in the same month. However, the Serbians suffered a series of setbacks, leading them to request international intervention. Furthermore, at the same time, the atrocities committed by the Ottoman Empire in Bulgaria lost their biggest ally, the British Empire. All these events eventually culminated in a conference taking place in Constantinople with several European powers in attendance. The great powers agreed on a project for political reforms in Bosnia and in the Ottoman territories with a majority Bulgarian population. However, the Ottomans refused the proposed reforms, which eventually led to the Russian Empire declaring war a few months later in April 1877. Furthermore, the Russian Chancellor, Prince Gorchakov, paid for Austrian neutrality with the infamous Reichstag Agreement, thus assuring Russia they would not enter the conflict. The Russians were joined by the Montenegrin, Serbian, Bulgarian and Romanian forces. The war took place mainly across the Balkans, but also in the south of the Caucasus region. The Russians emerged victorious against the Ottomans, in which the latter offered a truce that was accepted in January 1878. In the aftermath of the war, the Treaty of San Stefano was signed. These initial terms were harsh and favoured the Russian interests in the Balkans. Firstly, Bulgaria would achieve independence, acquiring Macedonia and eastern Romania, as well as parts of Albania, Greece, and Serbia. Meanwhile, Montenegro, Serbia, and Romania all achieved their independence. Meanwhile, the Ottomans had to cede many cities in Armenia and Georgia to the Russians. Subsequently, after the war, Abdul Hamid suspended the constitution in February 1878 and dismissed the parliament, though the terms were revised with the implementation of the Berlin Conference in July 1878, as the great powers were dissatisfied with the extension of power by the Russians. Firstly, the idea of Greater Bulgaria was amended as it was divided into three parts: the Principality of Bulgaria, the autonomous province of Eastern Romania. Meanwhile, Macedonia was given back to the Ottomans. Despite pleas from the Romanian delegates, Romania was forced to cede southern Bessarabia to the Russian Empire. The treaty also limited the Russian occupation of Bulgaria to only 9 months, which limited the time during which Russian troops and supplies could be moved through Romanian territory. Furthermore, the Russians acquired the regions of Batum, Adrahan, Kars, Olti, and Sparakamish and reconstituted them into the Kars Oblast. Lastly, the British would establish de facto rule over Cyprus, Egypt and Sudan. Throughout the Russo-Turkish War, the Kurdish Sheikh Ubaydullah had led Kurdish tribal forces defending the Ottomans against the Russians. In the aftermath of the war, he filled a political vacuum left by the devastation in the area and assumed the Kurdish leadership in the region. Afterwards, in 1880, he began a revolt in which he attempted to establish an independent Kurdistan, though this failed as he was suppressed by the Persians as well as the Ottomans. In 1882, he again attempted another rebellion with the end goal of a free, independent Kurdistan, but was soon arrested by the Ottoman authorities and exiled to the Hejaz. The problems continued for Abdul Hamid as the financial difficulties of the Ottoman Empire had forced him to consent to foreign control over the Ottoman national debt. With a decree issued in December 1881 that facilitated a large portion of the empire's revenues to be handed over to the public debt administration for the benefit of mostly foreign bondholders. Furthermore, in the same year, in 1881, the autonomous region of Tunis was conquered by the French. The union of Bulgaria and Eastern Romania in 1885 was another cause for concern for the Ottomans, as it threatened the empire due to the fact the country doubled in size. Despite the fact that Europe and North America were the worst affected with the Long Depression that had begun in 1873 and lasted until 1896, there were still issues in places such as Syria where the local sheikhs abused the landholdings. This led to the Amir revolt, in which the rebels successfully restricted the sheikhs to 1/8 of communal land. Throughout Ottoman history, the Armenians had somewhat enjoyed autonomy under the Armenian millet. Furthermore, Ottoman Armenia, composed of 6 vilayets, Erzurum, Van, Bitlis, Diyarbakir, Karpul, and Sivas. As with all other ethnic groups within the Ottoman Empire, in the last decades of the 19th century saw the emergence of the Armenian nationalist movement, culminating in the formation of 2 revolutionary parties, the Henchak, Dashnaktoyun, in 1887 and 1890 respectively. Despite the fact that both parties did not receive widespread support from the Armenian populace, the developments still alarmed Abdul Hamid, who was intent in suppressing the separatist sentiments within the empire. The Ottoman authorities increased their repression on the Armenians, raising taxes on Armenian villages, as well as arousing nationalist feelings and resentment against Armenians amongst Kurdish neighborhoods. When, in 1894, the Armenians in Samsun refused to pay an oppressive tax, led to Ottoman troops and Kurdish tribesmen killing thousands of them and burning their villages. As a result, around 100 to 300,000 Armenians were killed in towns and villages throughout the Ottoman Empire in what is now known as the Hamidian Massacre. The 1878 Treaty of Berlin also affirmed that Crete would be given autonomy. However, the Ottomans had repeatedly failed to implement the conditions of the treaty. As a result, 3 successive rebellions occurred in Crete in 1885, 1888, and 1889, though by 1895, Alexandra Karafiodori Pasha was reappointed as the Wali of Crete, but his zeal for the implementation of the agreement was met by fury by the Muslim population and led to renewed clashes between the Greek and Muslim communities in 1896. In February 1897, shortly after the Christians of Crete incited an insurrection, the Greek government sent a fleet and military to the island. After a couple of raids by the Greek irregulars, the Ottoman Empire declared war on the 17th of April 1897. The war lasted for 1 month, in which the Ottomans emerged victorious. Despite the fact that the Ottoman troops had occupied almost the entirety of Thessaly during the conflict, the frontiers before the war were restored with minor changes in the peace treaty. In the aftermath of the war, the Treaty of Constantinople was formalized, in which the island of Crete was taken en depot by the British, the French, and the Russians. Added, Prince George of Greece was made ruler, and Crete was effectively lost to the Ottoman Empire. Even though Abdul Hamid was a conservative sultan, he was an advocate for education. This can be seen with the establishment of 18 professional schools, and it is noted that 51 secondary schools were constructed in a 12-year period beginning from 1882 to 1894. Furthermore, the establishment of the Darfunun Sahana in 1900 occurred during his reign. These educational institutions were to bring about educational reforms in order to stop foreign influence. These secondary schools used European teaching techniques while instilling a strong sense of Ottoman identity and Islamic morality. The growing globalization during Abdul Hamid's time led to the construction of many railways across his empire, as the Orient Express connected the major cities of Paris, Vienna, and Constantinople. And in the early 1900s, Abdul Hamid also approved the construction of several railways that connected the Arab-speaking territories with Anatolia. This can be seen with the Constantinople-Medina Railway and the Constantinople-Baghdad Railway. Since 1517, the Ottoman Sultan held the title of Caliph, which meant he was the spiritual leader of all Muslims across the world. This meant he held power amongst Muslims that were not even under his jurisdiction, leading to the US Secretary of State at the time, John Hay, asking the United States Minister of the Ottoman Empire, Oscar Strauss in 1899 for Abdul Hamid to request the Sulu Muslims of Philippines to not engage in any rebellion against the Americans and to accept their suzerainty, as they had often rebelled against Spanish rule in the Philippines. However, the Moros later rebelled as the USA stated they would preserve the status quo implemented by the Spanish Empire. This was also the case in China, as the infamous Boxer Rebellion broke out in the north of China in 1899. Due to an array of foreign powers increasingly gaining power in China, the expansion of Christian missionary activity, as well as a series of natural disasters in the region, which prompted the Society of the Righteous and Harmonious Fists carrying out the rebellion. Though many different factions of Chinese society were involved in the insurrection, with the Muslims being no different. This was a cause for concern for the German Emperor Wilhelm II, who feared for the interests of his empire. Therefore, he requested Abdul Hamid II to find a way for the Muslim troops to stop fighting. The Caliph agreed to the Kaiser's request and sent Enver Pasha in 1901. However, by the time he reached there, the rebellion ended. As a result of the perpetual state of decline that the Ottomans were experiencing, everyone was trying to secure their portion of a potential collapse. This was no different with the Zionists, as the leader of the movement, Theodor Herzl, proposed a plan to Abdul Hamid in 1901, in which he offered 150 million in gold in exchange for a charter allowing the Zionists access to Palestine, which would have cleaned up a sizable portion of the Ottoman debt, in which Abdul Hamid famously stated, "Even if you pay me the weight of the earth in gold, I would not accept this. The price is the blood of all Muslims." The Young Turks were a group of Ottoman citizens that believed in progressive ideas. Despite the name, not all of them were ethnically Turkish. They were composed of many different ethnic groups within the Ottoman Empire, from the Circassians to the Albanians to even Greek and Armenian Christians. A lot of them pertain to the bureaucratic class, including military officers and civilian officials. Furthermore, the objective of the Young Turks was to create a Turkish state based on capitalist ideas. The establishment of the Committee of Union and Progress in 1889 was one of the several secret societies known as the Young Turks. Between 1906 to 1908, many officers and bureaucrats stationed in the Balkans were inducted into the Committee of Union and Progress. In 1907, the Anglo-Russian Convention was established, which brought an end to the shaky relations between the Russian Empire and the British Empire, which had emerged due to the Great Game, where the borders of Persia and Afghanistan were formally agreed upon, which led to people in Macedonia thinking the same thing will happen in the country, in which tensions were an all-time high. This eventually led to Ahmed Niyazi beginning the revolution by raiding the Rezne garrison cache of money, arms and ammunition, and assembled a force of 160 volunteers to the mountains surrounding the city for fear of international intervention in Macedonia. Eventually, Ahmed Niyazi, Enver Pasha and Ayub Sabri and other unionists within the Third Army fled to the mountains to organize guerrilla bands of deserters and volunteers, all while pressuring Abdul Hamid to reinstate the constitution, eventually causing Abdul Hamid to capitulate and announce the restoration of the 1876 constitution on the 24th of July 1908. Furthermore, censorship and espionage were abolished. However, a counter-revolution occurred shortly afterwards in April 1909 as agitation from religious Muslims, low morale and official mismanagement led to a mutiny amongst elite Macedonian troops of the Istanbul garrison on the night of the 12th to 13th of April. It is also noted that religious students and other elements of the city's garrison joined in the insurrection, in which they demanded the re-establishment of Sharia at the Hagia Sophia Square. The CUP-aligned government of Grand Vizier Hussein Himli Pasha responded ineffectively, and by the afternoon of the 13th of April, its authority in the capital had officially collapsed. The Sultan accepted his resignation and appointed a cabinet free from the CUP influence under Ahmed Tevfik Pasha. The uprising uprising was eventually suppressed, and the former government was restored when elements of the Ottoman army, sympathetic to the CUP, formed an impromptu military force known as the Action Army and entered Istanbul on the 24th of April after failed negotiations, and on the 27th of April 1909, Abdul Hamid, accused by the CUP of being complicit in the uprising, was deposed by the National Assembly, and his brother Mehmed V was made the Sultan of the Ottoman Empire, thus bringing an end to Abdul Hamid II's reign, in which he was the last Ottoman Sultan to exert effective control over the state, as Mehmed V simply ruled as a constitutional monarch with minimal power in political affairs.